Well, good morning, everyone. How are you today? Good. Only like 2 of you are good. How are you today? Do you have some energy? All right. Well, it is early. I'm Dr. Jill Huerta, and I'm Assistant Dean of the Graduate School and Director of the Center for Graduate Life and Learning. And I'll talk a little bit in this presentation about what we do at the Center for Graduate Life and Learning, because it's a great resource for a graduate school to have. So I'll talk about it a little bit when we discuss considering which graduate schools you might be interested in and what the support resources are there. But before, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I started when I was sitting in the seats that you're sitting in now at about your age. I was pretty convinced I wanted to be an attorney, wanted to go to law school. And when I graduated undergrad, I was an econ major, and I did something really, really smart, which was I went and worked for a law firm for a year as a legal assistant. And that pretty much convinced me that being a lawyer would be a mistake, that it wasn't a good fit for me. So sometimes figuring out what you don't want to do is just as important as figuring out what you want to do and what you like to do. So I ended up I was fascinated by econ, but I always felt like the puzzle stopped just where it got interesting, right? That you analyze economic trends, but econ doesn't really look at what those trends mean for society, for people, for organizations, how they create winners and losers. And that's what I was really interested in. So I went on to get a PhD in US business history, which kind of combined those two interests. And yet again, I thought I would, recruit for a tenure track faculty position when I finished my PhD. But life threw a few curves in the road at me. Just about the time I was ready to do that, my husband's father became very ill. I could not move to where a job was. And in academia, especially in history, it's hard enough to find any kind of job opportunity, more or less a local one. So I had to kind of remake my career plan, and I had some connections at the University of Michigan, and ended up going into higher ed administration. And that's how I got to where I am now. And I tell you that story because I'm going to talk a little about charting your path and the importance of knowing what path you're on at any given moment, and also the importance of having some flexibility with that path at every given moment. So that's me. I joined UNC Charlotte about 5 years ago. Really, really love being here. But let me know a little bit about you all. How many of you are seniors? Okay, juniors? A few sophomores? Just a couple? Any freshmen? No freshmen. Okay. And how many of you know none of us know 100%, but how many of you have a strong belief that you want to go to grad school? Okay. Of those, how many want to get a PhD at this moment? Or some kind of doctoral degree, I guess. And what about masters? Okay, good. And just yelling it out, what fields are you in? Do we have STEM? Do we have humanities, social sciences? What are your fields?
The arts.
The arts.
Biology.
Biology,
Computer science.
Great. What else?
Mechanical engineering tech.
Mechanical engineer. What did I hear on this side? Biomedical engineering. What else? Psychology. Anything else? Chemistry. Okay, so pretty good mix. Any other humanities, social science? Sociology. Awesome. So we're a little heavy on the STEM side, but it sounds like we have a mix. Well, great. And I think the biggest plus for all of you in this room is that you're already doing something really smart, which is to be in this class and to think ahead about planning for grad school, applying to grad school, making yourself competitive for those applications. So that's a great thing, and congratulations on taking that step, having some research under your belt. It's going to make your application much stronger. It's going to give you stories to tell and things to talk about when you write your essays, when you apply to grad school, and that's all good. I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to PowerPoints, as you can see, but I know people like some pretty picture in the background, so that's what you have here. But my first point is kind of what I started off with when I introduced myself, which is you need to know your path. Now, that doesn't mean a little bit of an echo. Maybe that's the Zoom. I guess it's okay. Is it bothering you all? Can you hear the echo? Yes, maybe we should. When I say know your path, I don't mean sitting in this chair right now. You need to know what you're going to be doing when you're aged 50, right? That isn't pragmatic. I don't think it's possible. It assumes you're not going to grow or change or have preferences that are different. That's what I mean. And in fact, I don't even think that's possible in a lot of fields anymore. There are still some fields, right? Like if you know you want to be a surgeon and you continue on that path, you probably will be a surgeon when you're 50. But in most fields, the skills and the job possibilities are changing so quickly now that even if you were sure you wanted to be in a certain place at age 50, that place might not exist by the time you get there. So I don't mean a very certain timeline of where you want to be when, but what I mean is right now you have to have a path and a goal in mind, right? So that you're not just kind of wandering here and there and there and over here and over here, and you don't end up getting anywhere. It's phenomenally easier if you have a path and a goal at any one time. You know, I'm going right there. And then if need be, if you find out you're not enjoying that path, if you find out you can't pursue that path, as very much happened to me, it's just a matter of pivoting a little on a different path, right? You picked up skills, you picked up experiences, and you can change your roadmap a little bit. But if you have no roadmap, that's pretty hard. So when I worked for the University of Michigan, I was in their MBA program. And I used to tell prospective students, I actually recruited in Latin America and Europe. For me, there were some really tough trips for that job all over Europe and Latin America. But I used to tell prospective students, grad school is not a place to find yourself. It's a place to go when you know what your goal is and you know what you want to do. And I say that because grad school is a big investment of effort and money. And we'll talk about funding. If you're in a doctoral program, usually the department pays for your tuition and fees and health insurance, and you get a stipend. So you're not paying in that case, but there's a lot of opportunity cost, right? You could graduate from here and get a pretty good job in the Charlotte area right now and make some good income. So the decision to go to grad school is the decision to forego that income at the moment to get more income in the future and to get somewhere where you're really going to enjoy and be stimulated by your career. But it's still too much of an investment to go there and find yourself. You know, you need to have a goal in mind. Does that make sense? And maybe you even have a couple goals in mind. Maybe you're even thinking, I'll go to grad school and I have a couple of choices. Maybe I want to go into academia, or maybe I'll explore some industry possibilities. That's fine. That's fine. But you have to have some kind of vision. And not only is that important for your own planning, but it's important when you complete your application. You have to have a story. You have to have a narrative. It doesn't have to be the real story. I used to tell people at Michigan, you know, you're lucky your admissions essay isn't a binding contract, because very few people actually ended up doing what they said they were going to do when they applied. But you need some kind of coherent working story. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions about that? All right. So knowing your path is the first ingredient for success. Once you know your path, it's extremely important, and you're at the perfect place in your career to begin building your network. And that means sort of building your network everywhere. Building your network here at UNC Charlotte, because you're going to need professors to write letters of recommendation. And that all works out a lot better if you don't need a professor your senior year when you're doing your application, and 2 weeks later ask them to recommend you, right? And it also works out better if you're not asking someone who you took a course from your freshman or your sophomore year and you haven't seen them in a couple years, and you're like, remember me? I did really well in your class. Could you write a recommendation for me? So you're forming those relationships during this time and maintaining those relationships. It's easy to finish a class and never see the professor again, right? Or I presume you're all working with advisors on your research this summer. So that's a relationship that you're going to want to keep up. That could be both a very good source for a recommendation, but also a good person to go to for advice about graduate school, about research, about the field, about different career moves or opportunities that you're considering. So start at home, network with each other, because network with your lab mates, for example, because maybe one day, 20 years from now, you're going to want to make a career switch, and that person you met during undergrad is in the place you want to go. So do that, network now. Network with your faculty, network with your advisors, network with administrators of the programs like this one that you're in, because that's building a whole network of support for you and people you can go to ask questions and advice. But in terms of preparing a grad school application, you need to be networking with people in the department that you think you might want to join at several different schools. So you can do this. Do undergraduates go to conferences? Is that so? If you go to a research conference and you see someone who is presenting research that you're very interested in, go and talk with them. Ask them questions. Tell them about what your interests are. And then afterwards, send a follow-up email saying, you know, it was great talking with you at the conference. I'm potentially interested in attending grad school at your university. Do you have any thoughts for me on things I could do to make myself competitive? Or just ask a follow-up question about the presentation. Just start up a conversation and make a connection. How many people are sort of really turned off or scared by the idea of networking? How many people would dread it in this room? A couple. In general, students are pretty hesitant to do that. Everyone is pretty hesitant to do that until they get started and realize it's easy, it's enjoyable, and it's extremely helpful. So one of the biggest things to understand about networking, if you're hesitant or if it scares you, is it's not about asking people for things. If you network properly, you are just connecting and forming a relationship and having a conversation and creating opportunity for mutual help. It's not just that you're asking someone you're networking with to help you. It's that you're making yourself available to help them, right? So that lab mate that I talked about that you might call in 20 years, they might also call you. And that's what making those connections is all about. So even if it's a hurdle for you, I really encourage you to get over that hurdle and practice it now, right? Early, where the stakes aren't so high, and if it doesn't go well, who cares, right? And then perfect it so that when it really, really matters, you have it ready. So faculty of programs that you would be interested in, it's probably the most important kind of networking you can do before you apply somewhere. Because if a faculty member from the chemistry department at the program, at the school that you're applying for, if you strike up a relationship and they find you interesting and you have a good match with that person's research and they think highly of you, they will go to, if they're not part of the admissions committee for that department, they will go to the committee and say, I want them, I want that person, and that will get you in. You know, provided that your qualifications are good enough to convince the rest of the committee that you should be admitted. So that's probably the most important one. It's also important because when you're applying to grad school, you're not just begging them to take you, right? You're shopping. You're looking for a place where you think you're going to thrive. You're looking for a department that has the interests and the values that you want to pursue. You're looking for an advisor who can guide you in attaining the goals that you have. So also through this networking, you're going to get an idea of what this person would be like to work with and what their lab or their research group is like and what the culture is in that department. So you're not just sort of broadcasting out things about yourself, you're also collecting information about the person, who could be your advisor, the department, the school. And as you move along in that relationship, you're going to ask questions about the student support available. So I mentioned that we have a Center for Graduate Life and Learning here. Not every school has that. What we do is provide professional development and wellness and community programming for almost 6,000 grad students that are on campus here across all the different programs. So if people are, for example, applying for internships over the summer, we have a host of workshops that will help them brush up their LinkedIn profile, create their CV or resume, answer interview questions, negotiate on salary, write their cover letters, etc. That's really important support, and that could be a make or break difference when people are applying for positions. We have a whole host of writing support here to help students succeed in their classes. So all of these kind of supports that a Grad Life Center can offer can really change your experience as a graduate student. So ask if they have a Grad Life Center. Ask if, you know, what kind of professional development they offer their graduate students. And that makes you look more desirable to the program. Like you're really thinking about your experience and what it's going to be like making a very well-researched and informed decision. And, you know, we all like, how do I put this politically, in a more politically correct manner? When I was growing up, the saying that applied here would have been, it's easier to get a boyfriend when you already have one. But that is way gendered and politically incorrect, so not how I would put it now. But if you don't just look like you're desperate to have them take you, and you are, you look a little more discerning, it actually makes you a more attractive candidate. So don't look arrogant, right? Don't look like I don't really need you. You want to look interested and passionate about their program, but you also want to look like this is a decision on my end too. and a very well thought out decision. I will make sure before I do this that I'm in a place where I can succeed. And that's how that kind of networking goes. It's also great to talk with current students in the program that you're considering. They will tell you things that maybe faculty won't. You can ask some questions of current students that you might hesitate to ask faculty or admissions staff. But I would give you this warning that when you network with a school, you should consider every person you talk to as part of your application. I've seen some very funny stories when I was in recruiting and admissions about students visiting campus and asking current students sort of inappropriate questions or divulging inappropriate things about themselves. And they get back to admissions. Those students go back and they tell admissions when you do something like that. So don't share anything you wouldn't be comfortable with admissions hearing, but you can still ask questions like, from the student perspective, what do you wish you had known when you had applied to grad school that you can tell me? Who's best to work with here? What is the workload like? What are the, what's the culture like here? Do you feel really well respected and like you have a voice? Is it, what is the diversity, equity, and inclusion philosophy, but also the sort of on the ground experience at a school like this? You can ask all those questions and get a lot of information. So that's another group to network with, and it's easy to find people either on department websites or on LinkedIn or in student groups. Graduate program directors, they're faculty who head up the program. So for example, here, biology, the master's program in biology has a graduate program director. They're called different things, but it usually has the word program and director in it. The PhD in history in biology has yet a different graduate program director. So you can find those people on the website and you can ask them all kinds of questions about curriculum and funding and your application. And then finally, admissions staff. They're a great resource, and I think applicants sell that short. Applicants often sit there and wonder, I wonder if it's better for me to send my standardized test score, even though they don't require it, or will that turn them off and I shouldn't send it? There's actually nothing wrong with picking up the phone and calling an admissions rep and asking that question. What would you prefer? What would be better? Now, don't ask a question that you could have easily looked up on the website, right? Because then you're just bothering them. But if there is an actual question that's going around in your mind, and there almost always is, right? Like, what are you looking for in this essay? What is your goal? What are you looking to find out about me? What do you think about taking a year off between undergrad and grad school? What do you think about this particular experience that I'm thinking of adding to my CV or resume? They'll usually answer all of those questions. And if you get a school where that's not true, you really haven't lost anything as long as it's a polite interaction. So I really encourage that because it matters if they remember you when the application comes across their desk. So questions about that? All right. Now we'll get into some nitty-gritty of the application process. And for some of you, this is kind of far off in the future if you're like a sophomore, but seniors, you're either maybe looking at this now, or if you're taking some time in between, at least in the near future. So you need to, create a list. I'd actually advise you to create a spreadsheet with all the schools that you're considering applying to. all of their deadlines and then a column for all of the requirements. This will save you so much stress. If you try to keep all of that in your head, you're gonna end up waking up in the middle of the night after you've had some nightmare that you missed the deadline for the school that you really want to go to, right? So don't keep it all in your head, offload it to a document, put calendar reminders, whatever it takes to create a system where you have all that organized really well. Because it will ensure that you hit all your deadlines, and it will also just remove a lot of stress from you. So pay attention to the deadlines and the requirements. They are different for different schools. Sometimes there's even more than one deadline for some programs. Sometimes they take in applications in 2 batches. And this can also be confusing. They often have different requirements. And it's really probably the #1 thing that will make your application competitive, besides, doing really well in your undergraduate years, is following directions and making sure your application is complete and responsive. And that's particularly true in the essays. But each school you apply to, you should consider it a tailored effort. It's not like taking my materials from the other school and adapting it to another one that I'm applying for. You'll be able to do some of that, but that's not how you should go into it. You should go into it as a separate activity. So you make sure you tailor your materials to exactly what they're asking for. Components of the application that often confuse students. Well, now the standardized testing is one of those, right? So, how many of you have taken the GRE or the GMAT or whatever test might be requested? Nobody? How many of you are looking at schools where you'll need to take a standardized test? A few of you. Okay, so I have a bit of advice for that. Take that standardized test before you graduate, before you leave here, because you're the smartest you're ever going to be for that test right now. And once you graduate and leave the university, it's all losing knowledge and going downhill in that area. Not to say you can't take it very successfully, but to get back on your game, you're going to have to put time and effort into it. And it takes time and effort to take it now. You should prepare now because the test is different from what you do in your daily lives. But take it now, take it more than once if you're looking for a really high score, because statistically, you are almost certain to improve on a second try. And make a good effort. Prepare vigorously, take it again if it isn't the score you're looking for, and have that done and out of the way. That score is usually good for about 5 years at most schools. So take care of that. If you don't need it, I guess it's a personal decision whether to take it or not. I will say, if you're a good test taker, if you know that you just do well on those kind of tests, I'd advise you to take it, because it's only going to help you. If you're, really horrible at standardized tests, and it's going to be a tremendous effort, and the school you want to go to doesn't require it anyway, you might come to a different decision. Another component that causes students some stress is the recommendation process. And this can be stressful because you don't have total control over it, right? You're asking someone else and a few people, 2 or 3 people, to write on your behalf. And I think the important thing to remember about that is you have more control than you think of that process. It is not completely out of your control. The first way you can control it is to network and build relationships right now, so that when it's time to ask someone to write your recommendation, they're there and ready, and they want to do it. They like you, they want to help you. I do recommendations quite a lot for students. not only for grad school, but also for professional positions. I'm their reference. And I look forward to doing that because that's a chance to help a student that I like a lot and want to see succeed. So if you've done things right, you probably have someone who's really excited about helping you. The next thing that you can do to control that process, and I really encourage you to do this, is when you ask the person to write the recommendation, you need to ask the question, do you feel that you can write a stellar recommendation, that you can provide a stellar recommendation about you? And I say this because I've gone through thousands and thousands of applications in my professional career. And not often, but every year there are a few where I read the recommendation and I thought, does this person like the candidate? Do they believe in them? It doesn't sound like they're a big fan. And there's actually a lot of negatives in this recommendation. And not only does that look bad because, you know, I'm thinking to myself, maybe this person isn't as good as they look on paper, but it also shows the applicant didn't understand their environment, didn't understand their relationships, right? You asked someone who wasn't a fan to write a recommendation for you. So be sure that the person you're asking is in your corner and is a fan and is ready to write good things about you. And then help them do that. And let me be clear, there's a line here. Sometimes faculty might say to you, could you just write something up? I'm so busy. I think you're marvelous. You should put all kinds of good things in there and then give it to me and I'll put that in the recommendation. Is that okay? No, that is never, ever okay to do. And it could even jeopardize your admission. So that's not what I mean. But what I do mean is sending them an email that says, you know, it was great to see you last week and talk about my future plans. Thank you for agreeing to be my recommender. Here is my strategy in my application. So it might be something like, I'm a little concerned that the admissions committee might think I don't have enough quantitative background, for example. So I'm really trying to emphasize all of my quantitative experiences, which are the following, right? And you can list them. I've also attached my most recent resume, so you have all of my experience and internships and extracurriculars in front of you. Hope this makes it easier to write a recommendation. If you send something like that, your recommender will appreciate it. You just made their job easier. When someone asks me to be a recommender, I ask for that kind of thing. But others don't always ask for it. And it'll not only make it easier and make it more likely that they'll do it on time, which can be a major problem, right? You said you do it, but you haven't done it yet. It'll also make it more tailored to the way you need it to be. So you have more control than you think you have, is sort of my theme here. The personal statement and the essays in general are a place that people spend a lot of time, and I think they're important. I think applicants spend a little too much time on those sometimes because they don't know what to spend time on. They don't know how to make them really good. But what I would say is the essay is an opportunity, the personal statement, short questions, whatever format these essays take, it's an opportunity to share things about yourself that they can't get from your transcript, from a standardized test score, from a recommendation, from a resume, from whatever the other materials are. And that means sharing things about yourself professionally and personally, your attributes that might be of interest to them, what you are like to work with in a lab group, what you're passionate about, what you're interested in. And authenticity is very important. Now, again, you don't want to give them too much information, right? You don't want to like go too far into the personal, but the personal as it would relate to you as a student is very important. So how did you become fascinated with the topic you want to study? You know, and what about it fascinates you and makes you passionate about doing research in this area? That's important to share. Nobody wants to admit someone who's like, yeah, I've kind of always studied, you know, in my own case, I've always thought history was interesting and it sounds like a pretty good career path. So that's why, right? But for my application, I told this story that I found economics fascinating and I loved it as an undergrad, but it stopped just where I thought it got interesting, right? So that's a much more authentic description of why I want to study history. And that was really important for my application because I wasn't a history undergrad and I had to convince them that I had enough history background and enough passion about the field that they should admit me. So sharing that kind of passion about what you do, sharing what you're like as a coworker, how you view the world, all of these things can be very helpful. Now, because we live in a politically divisive time, you probably want to be careful about sharing political views. I wouldn't do that unless you're absolutely sure that your views match the views of the people reading your application. And it's pretty hard to be sure about that. So for optimal results, be careful about that. But then again, if you're someone who, if they don't agree with my political views, I don't want to go there, then share them, right? Because that'll be a good way to vet it out. If you're asked some kind of question like, what's the biggest mistake you ever made? Don't come up with some false answer because you're afraid to look like you made a mistake. Because that's easy to see through and it's not very compelling, right? So don't choose some absolute disaster that makes you look bad, but choose a real mistake you've made and what you did to fix that mistake and what you learned from it and how you're behaving differently now because that happened. That's a very authentic, satisfying kind of answer to a question like that. Similarly, what is your weakness? There's all kinds of versions of that question that come up in applications. And it's a tough one because, like I said, you don't want to share a disaster, but you do want to give them a real answer to their question. And then finally, funding. I wanted to talk about that a little because you have choices when you look at grad school. If you are going to pursue a master's degree, you're usually going to pay tuition for that degree. And it's not cheap, right? But usually it's going to put you in a position to earn much more money when you graduate, you know, and presumably it's worth it. So you have to keep that in mind. There will be tuition. Sometimes there are opportunities to work as a teaching assistant or a research assistant, even at the master's level, and get maybe resident tuition credit. But that's more rare. Like at UNC Charlotte, we do have master's students in that situation, but not that many. If you're looking at a doctoral program, a PhD, or you know, a DBA, or like all the versions of doctoral programs, you should be funded. You shouldn't pay tuition as a doctoral student. If the school wants you, they will give you a funding package that includes paying your tuition, providing health insurance, and a stipend to live on. Now, that won't be, in most cases, it won't be a large stipend, At UNC Charlotte, it varies by departments, but the minimum stipend here is 18,000 an academic year. And you get that like in paychecks across the months that you're teaching or serving as a research assistant. You know, normally you have to work for those funds for the department in some way. So maybe you're even still going to have a student loan, but it could be a much smaller one. Or if you've saved money or you have family support or have some other funding source, maybe you don't even have to take out a loan. So this is something to look at. What are the stipends that schools pay? I can tell you private schools pay higher stipends than public schools, but they're often located in cities where you need way more to live. My daughter is currently a PhD student at Stanford. And when she told me what her stipend was going to be, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was like almost 50,000 a year. But when you consider living in the area of Stanford, living in that part of California, it might even be in effect lower than what UNC Charlotte students make, because the cost of living is so high there. So these are things to think about. And along those lines, if you are a sophomore or a junior right now, one thing you might want to look into are early entry programs here at UNC Charlotte. Has anyone looked at any of those? Those are very financially advantageous for a few reasons. Not every department has an early entry program, but for the ones that do, basically during your senior year, you're taking courses that count towards your undergraduate degree and count towards a master's degree. So you're double counting those classes. And that's a really good thing because first of all, you're paying during your senior year, you're paying undergraduate tuition rates for those classes. And undergraduate tuition is less than graduate tuition. So you're saving money. You also finish a year sooner. So after your fourth year, there's usually one more year of graduate work, depending on the program. And that year you are paying graduate tuition, but you've saved time. And I talked about when you save time, that means you're making money sooner and you've saved tuition in those early entry programs. And if you're interested in a PhD program, more and more of them now are requiring that you get a master's first. So that could be a very efficient way to get a master's first if you want to go into a PhD program. It's also just a good way to get a master's, which may be enough for your career plans. So it's worth considering. I guess I wouldn't be a good UNC Charlotte assistant dean if I didn't also encourage you to look right here at our graduate programs and see if they're right for you, because it's very easy to build relationships here. And that's a really easy transition to make if you're already here and you start a grad program here. No, it might not be right for you, and I never want to encourage you to do what isn't right for you. Maybe you need that change. Maybe you need that different experience, but it's worth considering. Sometimes it's easy not to consider what's right in front of you. So that's kind of my high level advice for a room of people at all different places in your undergraduate degrees and with a lot of different interests. I'm happy to take questions, and I also am happy to leave my contact information. I brought a pile of business cards, and if you need some more kind of specific one-on-one advice, you're welcome to email me. We can even sit down and chat. So what questions do you have? Yes.
Where's the physical location for the graduate program?
We are in Atkins Library. Do you know where the Career Center is?
Oh, okay. It's right next to the library entrance.
Yes, it's called the Atkins Annex now. So If you walk in that Atkins Annex door and turn right, that's the Career Center. If you turn left, that's the Center for Graduate Life and Learning. Yeah, come by, check it out. Visit us, we have snacks. Other questions? Yes.
So if you're like thinking of working for a couple of years and then going to get your master's after that, is there like any big differences between just like going straight into it or like working for a couple of years and going back?
That's a great question. And I think, what's your field?
Mechanical engineering.
Yeah, so that is the case. So you would work as an engineer.
Yes.
That's a case where I would say reach out to those programs and ask about it. To me, I think I really like work experience, especially if you're not absolutely convinced that a master's degree is what you need. I really like work experience because if you work as an engineer for a year or two, you're going to learn more about what you like within engineering, within mechanical engineering, and it might actually change your trajectory of what you study in your master's program. So I think it's a great idea, but I would encourage you, I'm not in those programs, I don't admit people in those programs, so see what their view is. Talk to a couple schools you might be interested and see how they feel about it. And also, if you do that, be thinking about almost keep a running, I'd say keep a Google document of experiences you're having that you want to remember when you apply, right? Because it's so easy to forget. It's kind of like on my team, I tell my staff members, keep a Google Doc of your accomplishments all year. Because when it comes to annual review time, it's so hard to remember every good thing you did. So it's kind of similar to that. But I think for your personal development, I think it's a really smart idea. And part of that is my story, right? It was really, really smart for me to go work and not go right to law school, or else I would have put all that effort and money into law school and then gotten a job and then found out all I do is sit behind a desk all day and I don't like that. I'm so tired of sitting alone in my office, you know. And it would have been, I probably would have just stuck with law because I would have put so much money and effort into it instead of ending up somewhere where I'm really happy. Great question though. And I'm sure something you're all going to think about. Other questions? Yeah.
So I'll be a junior this year, and I'm sure it's never too early to start looking into grad school, but it does still feel a year away, so it's not something I need to worry about. Are there things that I should be looking into, other than just schools that I may be interested in, as in testing or essay topics?
I mean, I think if you know a list of schools you're interested in, it isn't a bad idea to glance at their application. Just so I'm someone who mulls things over in my mind. And if I have that lead time, you know, where I kind of know what it's going to look like, I kick the tires a little, it's easier for me. But you can do that casually. And you don't have to do that. But I think if you already know, it's an advantage to do that. But most, I think you can network, right? You can look at the departments, you can purposely go to conferences where you know they're going to be presenting and make connections. And you can do, I mean, I don't know where you're thinking of going, but if it's not too far and financially burdensome, you can start thinking about a visit. It always impressed me as someone who admitted people when people took care of those things early. So I don't think it's too soon to do any of that. What else? Yes.
So, I'm just wondering, I know like, it's kind of different depending on what field you're in. For me, I am in law school. I'm just curious, is there something particularly you look more on like a school application?
Well, Again, I think that's a question. Law school is a perfect one to connect with the admissions representatives. That works really well for professional grad degrees like law school. I would, so I recommend asking them, but if you're asking me, like as someone who read thousands of applications, it's the authenticity. Cause I'll paint a not so pretty picture, okay? When I was admitting students for the Michigan MBA program, which is a top tier program, $120,000 in tuition, probably higher now, super competitive to get into. We had a very quick turnaround on our applications. And so I read like hundreds of applications in just maybe 3 weeks. So if you picture me working at home before COVID had made that popular, but I do that so I could have quiet, working at home, sitting in my home office, wearing my yoga pants, right, with my giant cup of coffee, spending 12 hours a day reading applications, getting so lonely that I started to talk to my dog, right? Not a pretty picture, but they all start to look the same, right? And you're trying to go quickly. It becomes tedious. It becomes not very fun. It sounds really fun to read applications until you do it for 6 or 7 hours. And then it's really not very fun anymore. But what some of them were fun, and what made it fun and rewarding and memorable is when people were authentic, when they shared something about themselves, and they feel like you came to life for me. I know you as a person, and in a good way, right? I've learned something good about you. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. But ask them, because they'll tell you. It's surprising. They will. I had people write to me and say, I was thinking of writing about this or this for essay 3. What do you think? And I couldn't give them advice that would give them some unfair advantage, but I talked them through making that decision, and I think it made their application stronger. Anything else? And not just in law school, by the way. Just not the career for me. I also had kind of a negative law firm experience. The one I worked for didn't do uplifting work. So, any other questions before we wrap up? All right, well, you have my contact information. I can give you a business card before I go if you want one. But otherwise, don't hesitate to stop in to the Center for Graduate Life, take a look at what that support looks like, or contact me. Use the Career Center too. They have resources while you're there. You can stop by the Career Center and learn what kind of resources they have for applying to grad school. And, use everything at your disposal to make your application as strong as you can. But yeah, thank you for your time and good luck to all of you. Hope your symposium goes well next week. Thank you so much.
All right, don't hop up yet. We have a couple of quick things to go over for one week. Our symposium. A couple of quick announcements. One, in case you did not see my announcement on campus yesterday, we are on our end a little bit behind with getting the approvals of the registrations and abstract submission complete. So I know the due date for the video upload is today, but don't stress out about it. Nobody has access to do that yet. So I will post an announcement when that is complete on our end. It's an us problem, not a you problem. So just keep your eye open. It should be today, but we'll probably give you maybe like a 24 36 hour window to get that done. So if it doesn't happen until tomorrow, it's not the end of the world. Okay. Keep in mind that does need to be in, because that completed registration and all your materials there is what is going to produce the abstract book for this year. So all of that information will be pulled from the Voyager One website to create the abstract book. So if you want to be included in that, make sure that that is all tied together. Second thing, if you have hours that you need to make up, even if it's just 1 hour, on Monday at 10 a.m., we will be starting our setup process in POP 340, where the symposium will be happening on Tuesday. So from 10 to 11, if you need to make up an extra hour and you're feeling froggy and want to come help us set up some of these easels, we would be happy to have you, and you're welcome to clock in and get an hour of work for that time. Okay, so we'll be there by like 9:45-ish. So again, POP 340, and we can post an announcement on Canvas to that effect as well. But that's a chance for you to make of that last extra however many dollars. Third, we have a federal work study student worker position available in our office for the coming year. So if you have federal work study funds to use, we are looking for a student assistant to work 10 to 15 hours a week. 10 hours a week. So it would be, it's on Hire Niner, so you should be able to find it there if you haven't seen it already. We're looking for help with things like our website maintenance, with social media, supporting our graduate assistant, who unfortunately will no longer be Kirsten, but it's another great young lady who's coming in, helping them with some different projects, all that good stuff. So you still get kind of an opportunity to be directly involved with the Office of Undergraduate Research, even if you are not planning to be an official scholar role in the fall, which I know we won't have as many spots open. So again, that's another good way. She just talked about networking, right? So that is another good way. Those part-time positions here and there, finding ways to use those positions strategically is another good way to do that networking. So if you have those funds and you're interested, you have questions, feel free to pull me aside after or shoot me an email. Okay, last thing. So setup. When you come into the student union on Tuesday, we will have all these easels set up, and there will be a phone. Thank you, Vanna White. I doubt many of you did that reference, and that's okay. Okay, so you will have a trifold phone here. And attached to each piece of foam will be your abstract number / your poster number and a set of push pins. Okay, so this is provided to you. You don't need to worry about your own foam. All you need to worry about bringing is your pretty smile and your poster. Okay, so when you come in, if you are session 1, you will go ahead and set up. Remember, registration or check-in is between 9:30 and 10:30, and then we'll start session 1 at no 10:30. Yes. Whew, I'm running out of fumes today, y'all. Okay, so we'll start at 10:30. So if you're in session 1, you'll come in and go ahead and set up your poster with the foam and clip it into these little pieces right here, and you will use these push pins to connect it. Okay, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. If you are in the second session, once you take your poster down, we will ask that you take the foam down as well and fold it up nicely, and then pop your easel down. It just comes apart like that, and you'll fold it up nice and neat and just lay it on the floor exactly where you're presenting. Okay, that'll make it that much easier for us. Takes you 30 seconds, but 30 times 70 easels, 60 easels takes us about 10 times. So just go ahead and make that nice and pretty for us so we can come around and collect it after. Additionally, if you want to stay after to help tear down, that can be another time that you clock in and make up those hours to just help us clean up a little bit. Again, not required, but available to you. Of any of those announcements, does anyone have any questions? Yes. You do not need the phone, no, the tripod. No, you just need the poster itself printed. Hold on just a second. Sorry. No, that just
Just
needs to be
the
the side of your
poster.
poster. Yeah.
Well, it must-
Register or fill out the presenter submission form? Okay, I don't think registration's open yet.
Right, okay, yeah, so it's kind of comes in phases, right? So we'll have the submission form, which you should have already done. With your like abstract and your abstract number and all that good stuff. And then we'll do the video upload today, tomorrow-ish. And then the registration itself, the full kit and caboodle, when the online symposium iteration will be open, it's open for 2 days. So we open it essentially like a day before the actual in-person symposium, and then it goes through the rest of the symposium day. So nothing is officially open in that capacity until the 7th.
Okay, well, there,
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
If you have the phone book, you need to print a poster on like a sturdy cardboard material, so you can print it on paper.
Nope, it can just be on the paper one because you'll have those push pens to connect it. So that might be a more cost effective option for some of you. Yes. What are the directions? It just needs to be a 2-minute video. You can record it from Zoom, YouTube. There are resources on Canvas for doing the YouTube recording specifically. It shouldn't be a massive file because it needs to just be 2 minutes long. And it's just your elevator pitch. So if you remember back to the presentation last week or the week before about communicating your research, remember you want to make it really clear for people who maybe not in the field. Why do we care about what you're doing? Keep it simple, make it palatable to the masses, right? So how can you do that in 2 minutes and make people care about what you're doing and explain how you're impacting that space? Yes.
Where do we get this printed?
Repros does it. Some departments have their own resources, so talk to your faculty mentor and see if there are options there. The library, yes, that is the other option.
Or the either question, like FedEx,
Or FedEx.
or Staples or Ostico or.
Oh, it is Mrs. Fox. Yes. Correct, yes. So we have the in-person going on Tuesday, and that's going to be open to whomever. Hopefully all your faculty mentors will be present, family, friends, anyone else who wants to come through. But the virtual iteration will be open for that 2-day span, like I mentioned before. So we want to make sure that anyone who's not able to attend in person can get as comfortable of an experience as you would in person. So you'll have that 2-minute video. And then in person, you'll just be with your poster as folks come around. You'll be able to give that elevator pitch, that whole spiel, talk to them more personally about your work. Yes. You better go ahead and get in line. It should be. It should be. I don't think it's as busy as URC season.
Yeah.
Since this is really the only group that's participating in the symposium, it's not campus wide, it's really pretty much just OUR scholars, and there's like 70 of you. So, you should be good to go ahead on submitting that for printing.
You can also go in and look at you like, hey, here's the date submitted by. You're like, yeah, I'm trying to get it by the state. And add to the time, but.
Awesome. Good. Okay. you have a question?
Do we wait for feedback before we, the poster, or will we submit it on?
What you submitted is fine. We just wanted to kind of have a checkbox that everyone was making sufficient progress and had the materials ready to go. So just make sure that you've gone over it with your faculty mentor. We're trusting that you two as a team feel good about what you're bringing to the table. If you have specific questions that you want feedback on, you're welcome to reach out, but we're not doing nitty-gritty feedback on the posters. We just needed like a tangible piece of evidence that everyone is ready to rock and roll.
The poster that we submitted on Canvas was the first draft of it, right?
Mhm.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, so if you needed to make changes before you did your video, that's okay.
So we're both checking in at the same time, 9:30 till 10:30, you said.
Yes.
Where are we, like, we're on the second section, where should we put our posters?
We'll have space kind of on the side for everyone to put the posters.
And the other thing too, I'm glad you asked that question. Another opportunity for you to make up an hour is to be present for the opposite session from which you are presenting. So if you're presenting in session 1, hang for session 2 and see what your peers are doing. Ask them questions, get experience, because we're kind of going to have them grouped by content, by department, and as much as we can. So, you know, a lot of your engineering peers may be with you in session 1, whatever it is. But some of the humanities or social sciences or biological sciences might be in session 2. So that's a really good way for you to kind of get a sense of what other kind of work is being done by your peers on this campus. So you can stay clocked in for the second session or clock in for the first if you're presenting the second, whatever your situation is. But we really, really encourage you to do that. You are also welcome to, if you can't do that, if you have class or some other obligation, you can clock in for an hour and give feedback on Voyager 1 to some peers as well. So those are also options. We want to make sure we're giving you some plentiful options to be really engaged fully in this process and make sure you have all your hours.
Will there be anything happening after the second session?
Lunch.
Okay.
Is that your question? I thought you had this too.
How is it, like, if our member candidates who will be in this session, how do they access the video?
So it'll be open on, we can share the link for Voyager 1, and like I said, it'll be open for 2 days. So it'll be open on the 7th through the end of the day on the 8th. So they'll be able to go into the virtual platform and see all the posters and the videos. Right there. Oh, I'm I'm looking too far to the left.
So I think it's one for instance, when does that start?
12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. Yeah, so session 1 is 10:30 to 11:30. We'll have a little bit of a break for turnover, and then 12 to 1 will be session 2, and then lunch will be at 1. Okay. Yes.
And when's your last day with that?
I believe it is Tuesday. I believe it is Tuesday. Yeah. I think so. We can make a mental note to double check on that and we'll post an announcement just to be sure. Yeah. That's a great question. The dress code is